Okay, hi everybody. Hello, hello, welcome. We are going to start as soon as Kibe gets up on stage. Yeah. Okay, hello everybody. We are going to get started. It's been quite a day for us. We are from San Diego. Our plane got canceled last night, so we hopped on the plane this morning. Wow. We just got here. And at 12:30, we are running out because our plane leaves. Yes. So we are very happy to be here and talk to you today. So my name is Tiffany Campbell. We are from San Marcos Unified School District, which is in San Diego. I am going to have these lovely ladies who are presenting with us introduce themselves.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is DiRanna. I am the Director of K-12 Equitable Curriculum and Instruction for our district.
My name is Angela Rico. I'm a senior at San Marcos High School.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kibe Gonzalez. I'm at Mission Hills in the SMUSD district, and I'm in 12th grade.
So we really do thank you for joining us today. Our topic is on changing the shape of the table, including student voice. Before we begin, we do want to take a moment to do a few acknowledgements. And I know I like to walk, and I see I'm walking off of the screen. So I'm going to stay up here. But we want to give you a minute to do an acknowledgement for our land acknowledgement. You may read. I will not read to you.
For those of you on Zoom, you can click the QR code and explore whatever land you are currently sitting on.
We also invite you to take a moment to acknowledge those who have come before, those who are coming after. Who do you have gratitude for today? I have gratitude for these four ladies, these are three ladies. And the fourth is my own lady who is at home, 14 years old, who gives me a run for my money every day. So let's talk a little bit about our goals for the session. First is to get you to think a little differently about student voice and leadership. Secondly, we'll talk about ways that you can solicit and utilize student voice and leadership in your district. We will talk to you about both a district-wide as well as a school-wide lens. And lastly, examining and rethinking the role of students in the creation of equitable educational systems. We've been on a journey in San Marcos. We continue that journey, but we're really kind of fired up about student leadership and student voice and the types of things it can do to really transform your district. So here's a quote we begin with, and I am going to read this one. What would happen if we treated the student as someone whose opinion mattered in the introduction and implementation of reform in schools? If meaning matters to the success of teachers and principals, it doesn't take much imagination to realize that meaning is central to student success.
So before we dive in a little bit, I want to talk to you about our district because you should know kind of our demographics. But before I do that, just take a look at these wonderful children and students and young people and colleagues in our work. We are a district in North County, San Diego. We have about 19,500 students. We have 10 elementary schools. We have 2 K-8s. We have 3 middle schools, 2 comprehensive high schools who are the biggest in the county, both of them. San Marcos High School is number 1 and Mission Hills is number 2.
3,500 and about 3,000.
Yep. And then we have an alternative school and we have an independent study school. Our district is really interesting when we look across socioeconomic boundaries. We have kids who are living in the most poverty to kids who are living in $2 to $3 million homes. So we have a wide variety of experiencing kids that come to our district. We're about 50% white, 50% Hispanic. It kind of juggles every single year, but we kind of lie right along those lines. So when we were in San Marcos and we're thinking about kids, in thinking about what we're going to do with our students. I think this is a question that everybody ponders. In what ways do our current systems and practices acknowledge, affirm, and celebrate students' wisdom and cultures in ways that foster belonging and agency? I think that's a question in all of our minds, right? Whenever we're thinking about how do we engage with kids, what do our systems do? What do our practices allow for? What I would like you to do, if you guys can click on that QR code, there's a little poll in the room, and we're going to take a little, where are you sitting? We'll talk about where we sat in this question, but I'd like to know where you guys are. And I know I'm totally off screen for Zoom, so sorry. I just realized. So take a moment in your district, in your school, even in your classroom, if you're a teacher, where do you sit? In what ways do your current systems and practices acknowledge and affirm students in designing new things? So it's an open-ended question. You can type whatever you want. I think the Slido is opening. It's not opening. Oh, hang on, sorry. Now is it open? Now it went away. Is it open now? Oh, we're gonna get the technology right, guys. Sorry about that.
It's open. We're good. Okay.
So just to voice out what you are all putting in either from Zoom or from the room, clubs, groups, and awards. Some of you have community culture events. We provide translators for those events. Students have both governance council and an equity council. That's awesome. That's good to hear. What other things do you do that you acknowledge and affirm and celebrate? Using different current authors to meet social events. Is that person in this room who wrote that? Can you expand a little bit more on what that means?
Types of people that are done and try to pick authors, current authors that are writing books about social events that are happening.
And for the curriculum in the classroom, or that you would bring to professional learning for teachers? For the curriculum in the classroom, that's lovely. That's a nice nimble system you have. That's great. I'll read one more, Tiff. I think we have clubs and extend services on our school site to support students who are justice engaged. Oh, I like that term, justice engaged.
Okay, so let's get into it. Here's what we're going to talk a little bit about the things that we have been doing, kind of the mindset shifts that we have taken, and take you on a little journey. So a couple of years ago, I don't know if I said I am deputy superintendent. At the time I was interim superintendent. Never do it again. Our board really wanted to take a step forward in our equity focus. So a few years ago, we adopted a board policy on equity. One of the things I talked to the board about, however, was this idea of we don't just want to have words on a page. We don't just want to have a policy to have a policy. So our focus really was, if we are going to make a commitment to equity, then we're going to make the commitment. So depth, sustainability, and a focus on students, foregrounding students in our equity work. I don't know if where you are is the same as where we are right now, but there are lots of things that are happening in our world and in our districts that are somewhat controversial. We have avoided a lot of the difficulty that other districts have been facing because of this third bullet point. We really do focus on foregrounding our students. Not only does our language begin with students, but we put our students in front of our board, we put our students in front of our community, and it's real hard to say crazy stuff and do crazy things when students are standing in front of you. We also have adopted a portrait of a graduate. Again, we have an equity focus in our portrait of a graduate. We begin our strategic promise in our portrait with an equity statement. Our equity statement was written in collaboration with superintendent, myself, our board members, as well as students. And in it, I will not read the entire thing. You will have access to these slides. But our focus, racial, socioeconomic, social, or cultural factors will not predict whether or not our students are prepared for college, career, and civic engagement. And to deliver on these promises, these are the bullet points that we have said that we are going to do. And every month at our board meeting, I have to stand up and say the types of things that we are doing to live up to this promise that we have made to our students. We have 4 goals that are part of our strategic promise, how we're going to get to our portrait. 1 is future-ready students, 2, future-ready learning environments, 3, future-ready educators, and 4, future-ready system. Real easy to say, real hard to do. Oh, real hard to do. But really, we think about this in kind of a bottom-up way. We have to have our system working. So that is our business services, our educational services, our human resources, our governance, all working together in order to get our educators prepared so that they are creating learning environments that are equitable for our students, so that our students truly do feel as if they can and will become future ready. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Like, a year ago, we're feeling pretty good about ourselves. Like, we have this equity statement, we had our strategic plan, we have this portrait of a graduate. Good about ourselves. But then there's this kind of nagging feeling of adults were doing a lot of pretty good work that we felt, but we go back to this question of, are we really actually affirming what our students are doing? We said we were going to foreground our students. Were we actually really listening to what our students were saying? And were we advocating for our students' agency? And while we felt we were doing pretty good, I've got to tell you, we were not doing real great in these 3 areas. Not as good as we could have been doing. So, who is our next question? How do we partner with students to co-design education, policies, practices, and services? And when we say partner, like for reals, how are we partnering with our young people? If you have not seen, one of the things that we did, we believe in the research. WestEd has done a really nice piece on student voice, agency, and co-creation. They've taken a lot of research, boiled it down. The Equity Accelerator has focused on these areas. So when you're thinking about the elements of student voice, agency, and co-creation, there are interior and exterior things that you're thinking about. So as an individual mindsets and changing one's own perceptions. So here's the first shift we made individually, and we're still working on it with some of our folks. Our students are colleagues in the work. I stopped calling them kids. I use young people. But when I refer to our students in any public setting, they are our colleagues in the work. We work with them to create our educational environments. We got away from saying we work for you. We work with you. As a collective, we needed a community culture that is fostering a collective commitment to engaging and elevating student perspectives. We're going to get into more detail about what that looks like and what that means. But really thinking about how are we being intentional in our work to elevate student voice and agency. The exterior piece, what are the interpersonal relationships? So how are we interacting with our young people, with our colleagues? And then structural and systemic supports, what's happening on our school campuses and what's happening in our districts so that we have systems that actually make this a reality. Here's a quote from WestEd's text that got me in the gut. Adults often dismiss students as unreliable, uninterested, or not quite competent enough to participate in major decisions shaping their experiences at school. And I had to be honest with myself, and I think many of us had to be honest with ourselves, even if we didn't say it out loud. One of those things came out of our mouths at some point, or at least was in our mind. Last line. Additionally, when students do weigh in, their contributions can be tokenized or not taken seriously by adults. Yeah, come to the table. We're so happy to have you here. Be quiet. For adults looking to bring more student voices into their decision-making, intentionality is the key. So, Toshalis and Nikula have created a continuum of collaboration with adults, how students are collaborating with adults. We would like you to take a minute to look at this continuum, because this is really where we are focused on moving us from our students being heard to our students being leaders. And so we move from this portion of the continuum of expression, they volunteer their opinions, and I call on you if you raise your hand, and I talk to you if you raise your hand, and we acknowledge your contributions and say, that's great. All the way over to leadership, which is co-planning, co-executing, and having shared responsibility for outcomes. We are not there yet, but we have made some movement on the continuum.
Quickly scan the QR code. We're going to just take a quick temperature of the room and then Zoom. On this continuum, where do you currently fall? If you need us to read out the smaller text of what's in between consultation, participation, it's also on the Slido, but wondering where you're at when you look at this continuum. Wherever you would like to be, if it's you in your classroom or if it's the district or the site, whoever you're representing today. Votes are slowly coming in. Thank you for those of you who are participating. It helps give us a sense of where we are and who we're talking to.
Do we have an average?
Yeah, so I'll do a quick little scan. We have about 14% of our participants are at expression, about 33% are at consultation, 27% at participation, nobody at partnership, about 13% at activism, and leadership, we have 7%. That's out of 15 poll results. So there's probably one or two people who are already at leadership, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
Pretty cool.
Fantastic. Okay. So colleagues in equity. Some of the research tells us there are some things that you can intentionally do to elevate student voice. And we go from kind of lighter to a little more deeper. So support state required surveys, develop district level student surveys to gather information about instruction in school climate, include students on governing bodies, create student advisory committees so that you have more student perspective, create specific initiatives to engage student groups that are historically marginalized, encourage schools to build time for student educator collaboration and enable personalized learning, and offer student-led conferences and provide training to teachers on how to conduct them. Okay, so we doubled down and we went in with a lot of these. So speaking of our colleagues in the work, I would like to introduce you now to Angela Rico, who will take over.
All right, everyone. Now it's time to pay attention. Now it's time to lock in. Are you ready? Not
And
not
this
in
is
terms
what
of
it's
that.
like.
In terms of this is the most useful thing ever. You understand? This is the 5 steps to equity leadership. This is how you get to this side of that panel. Nothing else. This is it. 5 steps, structure, mountain, you're there. Got it? Okay. Listen, support, platform, opportunity, leadership. Good? Perfect. You guys are all perfect. Okay. We're done. Bye. Just kidding, guys. That stuff doesn't exist. We're not here to give you guys 5 steps to perfect equity. That doesn't exist. It's different for all students. That's just how it worked for me. So I'm up here to tell you kind of my story of how I was empowered through clothing. So one day at school, I was in my sophomore year. I showed up to school wearing pajamas, and that's so not like me. And I know you have those students that show up every single day with pajamas. That's not me. I do it maybe for the spirit days. And then when I have a giant exam and every AP test, I will be in my same pajamas. Fact. But I never wear pajamas on regular school days. And it was really odd that I did. But one day when I was wearing my pajamas, I had a boyfriend at the time. And we were just sitting at a lunch table and we were just talking with our friends. And then a supervisor approached us and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Oh, we're talking." Eventually, this led into this whole discussion. We ended up in the AP office and I did some reflection after this. And I was like, why didn't she just take me seriously? Because I sat in there and I said, "This isn't who I am. It's not who I am. It's not who I am. It's not who I am." She said, "I'm going to call your mom. Figure that out. And you need to reflect on yourself. You're getting Saturday detention. It's going on your permanent record. I'm sorry." And I was like, okay, perfect, bye. So I left and I was very discouraged. And I was like doing some reflection. It was like 3 a.m, right? Couldn't sleep that night. So I reflected and I was like, wait, what happened? Because that's not who San Marcos High is. We don't really judge based off of appearances. Oh, appearances. I was wearing pajamas. Duh. So I walk up to my mom and I'm like, "Mom, do you think it's a good idea to email her and say, 'Hey, can I get a second chance? Can I step into your office and talk to you?'" My mom said, "Sure, go for it." At this time, I was a first year, or no, this would be my second year in ASB. I'm an ASB kid. I created a website. I went to prom as a freshman to put it on. And I was like, I'm not the kid that wears pajamas and makes stupid decisions in the quad. So I decided to dress myself appropriately in school clothes. And I stepped into her office the next day and I said, "This is not who I am." And she listened. And that was the first step. She listened. She said, "I believe you because I want to give you that opportunity to express yourself. I want to give you the opportunity to show me who you actually are." So she did. And she said, "Angela, you don't belong in Saturday detention. You belong on the school's equity team. You fight for what's right for you." I said, "It's a dress code error. It's not a personal error." They were actually treating my boyfriend differently too. And I said, "It's not a personal error. It's a gender error." And she said, "Wait, no, you're right." So she listened and she gave me that opportunity. And that's how I ended up on the school's equity team, where this is the first dress that I wore to the first ever meeting. So I'm sitting in the Future Center wearing my dress, excited for my equity meeting, first ever equity meeting. I had no clue what that meant. But then someone from the county office appeared in our Zoom, and I was like, that's really odd because I didn't know these people existed. I actually had no clue that a county office was a thing before this, but I'm sorry. Beautiful buildings, though, if that helps. But I started my work in equity where I met someone from the county office. And through this connection, through this year-long training of working with adults and working with the county office and working with the district office, I started to realize that adults are willing to listen if, a student is willing to express themselves. And that was the biggest thing about San Diego County to me. That was the biggest thing about San Marcos Unified to me, was that they were willing to listen. So I decided, why don't I just take this connection that I have with this one guy at the county office, one guy, and I said, how about I take this and go a little bit further? Okay. So when I was on the equity team, still in my sophomore year, I went to the San Diego County Office of Education Equity Conference and I presented as a panelist. And I was comfortable there and I liked it there. It was a conference exactly like this. But then the next year, I wanted to do something more. So I took that connection and I emailed the guy out of absolutely nowhere. It was like a Wednesday third period. And I was like, "Hey, I have a workshop. Can I present?" He goes, "Sure." Once again, opportunity, platform, support. It's all of this that are giving us a voice. And they gave me this really cool t-shirt that is only given to presenters, and I felt really exclusive, but it's fine. So there's that. And then that is how it leads to them supporting us in business attire now. I show up with heels that I've been wearing since 5 a.m. You know, it's all about giving the students an opportunity and seeing what they can do with it. I walked into the AP office wearing pajamas and making a foolish mistake. And she took a chance on me. She decided to listen. 3 years later, I'm traveling the state apparently and presenting to, I can't. But this is also a big image of how they give us a lot of freedom to express ourselves personally. You know, they gave me a theme, but I'm not really one to stick with a theme. My Instagram is all over the place. But they told me, like, you know, here's your slides, do something with it. And so I decided to do this. But it's all about giving your students a creative outlet and a way to express themselves in their true nature, if that makes sense. Okay.
All right, I'll introduce myself. Hi guys, my name is Kibe. This is my story. But I think that is so great. Everybody has a different path, and then now I'm here to share my path to show you how there's a variety of ways that we can lead our students into being their most truest self, which is the theme of the last keynote speaker. But mine is kind of taking you through the journey of my experience through the entire district. And so right here we start, it goes like this. So we start right here, the second grade picture. That's the earliest I have, but that's the first teacher that I felt that really cared for me. She always talked to me. She always listened, because at that point I was still like learning English, but she supported me every day. When I walked in, she would greet me, and then she would teach me a word in English and I would teach her a word in Spanish. But that is how I started my journey. I'm going to go briefly through. This is me through 3rd grade. So 2nd, 3rd grade. My 3rd grade teacher was amazing. She was the first one to give me like a leadership outlet. So that little girl pictured right behind me in the teal was my first opportunity. When she was new to the school, my 3rd grade teacher said, "Hey, Kibe, I think you'd be perfect to help show her around campus, like show her around. I think you'd be a good friend." And that, although it's like, oh, show one person around, that to me was like, wow, like someone really believes that I'm the best person for this. Okay. So I took it and ran with it. So that was my first experience into like being given an opportunity into this like leadership role. And then that is me throughout middle school. For 6th and 7th grade, I peaked in the end of elementary. I was really excited. I was ready for leadership opportunities. And then I kind of fell. So 6th and 7th grade, I did nothing because I hated school. I did not like going to math class specifically because I thought it was the hardest class ever. And then I just stopped liking school after I had that one math class. And it wasn't the teacher, it was the way that the system was set up. Like we go back to it. I loved the teacher. I hated the course and how it was built and designed for us. But then in 8th grade, I had the opportunity of joining ASB, which there I am in the city office with the mayor. That was my highlight of 8th grade because I was like, wow, like people really believe in me. Like I can do this. And then I got sent to like a leadership camp, which I had to like apply for and all of this stuff. And then we get into freshman and sophomore year. Freshman year is not pictured because COVID times. Freshman year also was down for me because there was no opportunity, and like connecting via like online was impossible. I know it was hard for teachers, it was hard for students. So that was kind of like a low year for me. But then when we returned back on campus, I joined ASB again. But this time it was different because it was a new teacher who did not know me at all, didn't know the campus. And so she made sure that she started like fresh and clean slate for everyone, like clean the slate for everyone. And she was the one that gave me the opportunity to like start joining equity groups and equity teams. So right there with the like cake, and then there is when I ran for sophomore class president, and I won it because no one ran against me. But but she encouraged me to do that. And she told me like, it's okay if no one's running against you. You still have to show your student body that you want to run for them. And so that was the transition there. And then we move on to next one. And then here's my junior year. I would say my favorite year, well, I'm senior now, but like my favorite year so far has been my junior year, because that was when I struggled the most. So I had some family issues going on, and I previously in sophomore year, I met a teacher who I think embodies equity, embodies like my ideal teacher that I think should be like, she's the model. And I'm not saying that because she was like the funnest class. It wasn't the most exciting class. It was English. And for me, I do not like writing. So 1, I don't like math. 2, I don't like writing. But that teacher during the transition from sophomore to junior year, she was the only one that asked me about what was going on. She was the only one that emailed me when I was at home to check in on me and say, hey, are you okay? She was the only one that sent me books to read, and candy. And it was kind of strange because I was like, teachers aren't supposed to do that. But then again, it's like, well, what is the role of a teacher, right? You can't, you're not told you can't do that, but she went out of her way to do it during one of the most difficult times in my life. And she still connected to me. Junior year, she talked to me the whole year, and she wasn't even my teacher at like that point because I had different classes. And she was the one that told me like, no, you don't have to like hide at home and like keep all that away from school. She was the one that told me like, you should share your story. Like, I think I appreciated it, and I think other people would appreciate it. So that's when I started getting into the equity team at my school, where I got to go to 2 different camps called Camp Lead. And that's where I was able to share my story, because the people that were leading the program were vulnerable about their own story, and they supported us, and they told us that this space that we created there was a space that everyone could contribute to, and we can all learn from each other. So that was my highlight of junior year. And then we go into, I got invited by Dr. Brown, amazing lady in our district. And she also picked me up after that. She said, hey, like, I really like your story. I think you should come speak at this conference. And I didn't know how big it was. And when I showed up, there was like 1,000 people in the room, and I was like, I cannot do that. But she supported me, and she told me like, no, people need to hear the truth, and people need to hear your story, because that's the only way we move forward, and that's the only way you'll get supported. So that was me at the equity conference. And then there's me talking to the superintendent. I love our district because one of the main things that they focus on is listening. And that's like the bare minimum, but for us, it's huge. Like listening to your students. That's me sharing how important my research paper was. But he listened. He was so engaged. He was asking questions. And so to me, that shows me that our district cares, and they're able to take a few minutes out of their super busy schedules to listen to us. And then there's a picture of me. I applied to be the ASB executive president, and I won. And I was so excited because I felt like we needed a shift in our school specifically to focus on student voice. And so I'm working on that currently. Because when you hear ASB, you think all that like spirited stuff, like, oh, football games, like rah, rah, like let's go. But I think what I'm hoping to bring this year is student voice and student advocacy. And then throughout there, I'm going to breeze through a little bit more. Those are just pictures of me where I feel like people are supporting me. So everyone pictured in those pictures are people that I feel supported me to get me to the point where I am right now. And there is me, Angela, Dr. Campbell, and Nikki. We won an award for being resilient. But I think it's kind of funny, and I kind of appreciate it because we're just sharing our story. And so it's like, whoa, I can get an award for sharing my story. But it's like the little things that motivate you. And that's why I'm here today. And they invited me, and I appreciate it. But my advice for you guys is just like, listen to your kids. Like, I remember my second grade teacher, and it literally can be listening, communicating. And look, it's followed me throughout my years and to the point where I am right now. So yeah, that was my story. Thank you.
Aren't they amazing? When I was 17 years old, I was not doing anything that they were doing. So we brought them along because we are serious about colleagues in the work, and these are our colleagues in the work. And sometimes what's fun about kids is you don't know what they're going to say, right? So we did give them blank slides, and we did say, fill in whatever you want, and this is the story that they wanted to tell. But what's nice about that is that they are somewhat of an end result of some of the things that we've been doing. So I want to give you guys some practical things that we've been doing in our district. We have an equity team structure. It was really important for us that every single site was involved in the equity work. So when we engaged in training with them, we said you have to have 3 people come from your site. One has to be an admin. It was also important that our district office, when Tiffany was talking about it's a system, our HR is involved, our business services is involved. As a district team, we are engaged in equity work. And of course, it was important that the students had an equity team as well. So what we did 2 years ago is we worked with our county office. I don't know if this county office does it, but our county office worked with us, and we trained for 8 sessions. The kids trained in one and the adults trained in the other. And the last 3 sessions, we came together and we made a plan together. And that was our first real experience in co-designing things with them. Because of that, we went out on empathy tours and listening tours. And because of that, and because I'm audacious and so is Dr. Campbell, we said we can have our own equity conference. So San Diego County has an equity conference. We now host our own. So we have about 500, 600 teachers who come. We have about 27 presenters. We have student presenters. These 2 ladies presented, which is crazy the first year. And the second year, they actually moderated the entire thing. And so that's some of the work that we're doing. I think we're going to go further into more of what we're at the site levels. I'm going to have Kiba and Angela tell you a little bit about that.
So initially, the whole thing is to enhance and empower those who already have a voice and kind of like uplift those who don't choose to use their voice initially. So this can be with different people that already have a platform that they can speak upon, such as ASB. You know, we both serve as ASB presidents. So getting us up here in front of a bunch of people with a microphone is pretty easy. But at the same time, we also have a lot of people that don't necessarily talk in front of large crowds, but more of people that they're comfortable with, such as club presidents or anything like that.
Yeah, the main thing with this is that on your guys' campus, I know it sounds hard to say like, you got to build these communities, support them, but there are already communities there. The only thing you have to do is give them a platform and support them. There are already people on your campus that are able to build these communities and pull from all of this to start a group. So you guys don't have to start them. You just have to support them. Yeah.
And I will add just one more piece to this. We also use Panorama, which is basically it's a survey that is for social emotional learning and social emotional health. So in our Panorama survey, we survey students 3 times a year. It does allow us to get to the individual student level. And so we have our administrators and our counselors, et cetera, who are on their NTSS teams, actually look at those individual students who clearly are having something is going on. And we need to hear from those as well. This idea of uplifting those voices that are traditionally voiceless. I want to give kudos to these 2 ladies because they have not said it. but Kibe is on our superintendent's advisory council. And one of the things that they have done is made a commitment of, you know, typically you do hear from the ASB students. You do hear from students who are in athletics or they're in the big things, but they made a commitment to say, we're going to bring someone along with us so that it is not just those who traditionally have the voice. So kudos to you guys. But again, it's this idea of what are the different structures and things that you can do, little tweaks that you can make to really start hearing from your students and listening to your students, and then doing something from what you hear from your students. Kibe wants to talk.
Really quick also about that, a lot of the groups are teachers send in recommendations and teachers pick. What we did, which is really unique to the Superintendent's Advisory Council, is asked students to bring students, which gives you a ridiculously large turnout, because those are students who invited their peers instead of being told to be a part of this group. So yeah.
So I want to just focus in on our listening tours and empathy interviews for a second, because this actually has led us to the next work when we talk about co-designing with kids. When we were in our training, we had selected kids. We asked principals to send the kids that you think would be great in equity and come join us, and we're gonna have a great time. And as we started listening to these kids, we started hearing not just about their stories, but we started hearing about other student stories. And it made us wonder as a district office, do we really know what's happening with our kids, right? So what we did is, as a district office team, our superintendent, our board president, Dr. Campbell, some of our principals, some of our students, decided to go talk to every single secondary school. And what we learned when we asked the kids the questions, and we asked principals to give us the kids who may be invisible, who may be failing math, who are having high anxiety, who have attendance problems, just bring them to the table. We want to talk to them. And when we asked them, how is it going for them? It was incredibly hard to hear. Because what they told us is our teachers don't like us. What they told us is our teachers don't call on me. Our teachers don't even know my name. I'm not connected. I only come for my friends. I don't come for any class. How many classes do you like? I like one maybe. And that was like a CTE class. I'm telling you, as a district office, thinking that you're doing all the great things in the world, and we have this equity statement, we got the strategic promise, and we got these kids who are phenomenal. And then when you listen to kids, we were not doing the things. And it's hard to hear, but it's important that you sit in the uncomfortableness of that and you listen. The other thing that they told us was how many microaggressions are happening for them. They told us that it happens in the hallways, it happens at lunch, it happens in their classrooms. It happens when adults are around and adults don't do anything. That one was tough. That one was hard. So because of that work with our kids last year, what we've done this year, we wrote an anti-bias grant. If anybody has that, that's awesome money to have. They're doing another round. If you don't have it, go apply for it. It's like $150,000. So with that money, we are partnering with several different agencies to come into our district and work on microaggression protocol. How do we disrupt microaggression protocol? And those same entities that we had before, the district office, the sites, and the students, all of us are going through the training. So the kids are talking separately on their own. We just had them a couple of weeks ago. It was awesome. We are going through our own training, and at the end of it, we will come together and start to talk about, so what do we do with this new training? How do we bring it to our teachers? How do we bring it to our campuses? That came from Tiffany and I one day in a room going, we should go listen to our kids, right? If you have that hunch, act on it. Go do it. You want to talk about district belonging?
Yes. Oh, yes, I do. So, Nikki has talked about the disrupting microaggressions. One of the things we also heard loud and clear was that our students wanted authentic relationships with their teachers. Treat us like we're human. They need to act like they're humans. It would be nice if they showed some humor every once in a while. So we have this big strategic promise and all the things of making students future ready, and our students were not connecting to school. So this year, in addition to our microaggressions piece, our big piece is a focus on connection and belonging. So we have a district kickoff that happens at the beginning of every year. Our superintendent stands up and sometimes he talks about various things. And this year, if nothing else, connection and belonging. And we mean it. And we mean it. If nothing else, connection and belonging. I don't care if they have an A, but they don't want to be in your class. Connection and belonging. And if you remember a few slides ago when we had the square and we talked about mindset shifts, you guys, it's a mindset shift. The most important thing, you heard it earlier in the keynote, the most important thing, connection to the young people that are in our care. We also have safe and inclusive schools training. Nikki was hit with the microaggressions. I was hit when we had a student say, you know, I really just would one day like to be just Ashley and not trans Ashley. It hit real hard, real hard. So our safe and inclusive schools training, every school, every teacher, LGBTQ plus training. And that has been hard because we have had people walk out and we escort them back in. And we have had people say, well, I'm not going to do it. I don't believe in it. And our mantra is, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to understand it. Every student, each and every student in our care, each and every student. Kibe had a picture of Dr. Walker. And one of the things she said to us last week was, it was a privilege. It's what a privilege it is to not have to understand. I don't understand you. What a privilege it is. This has been huge for us. It has been a push. I will tell you, it has been a push. We talked about our equity conferences. We were going to play a little piece, but we're not going to play a little piece because our time is running. But our equity conference, we actually have our students who are hosting. We have our students who are panel presenters. They are organizing. They are presenting at non-SMUSD conferences. You'll see a picture of our Jessie Way, who just graduated because of her work at our district equity conference, where she had, I think, the most people attend her session. She has now become, can I say it out loud? She is one of San Diego's top 25 teens. She is now presenting at some county conferences that we are bringing her to. And this was the first time that we actually had a neurodivergent student, and she is very open with her autism and really taught us a lot. It's amazing. It's amazing. Okay. Voice, agency, and co-creation on campus. All schools. We have all schools doing open-ended surveys, street data. You guys, street data. Let's forget about the percentages. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. Street data, get out there, talk to your young people. I'm going to commend Ms. DiRanna, because when Ms. DiRanna, who is our Director of Equitable C&I, was looking at our grades in math and saw all of the failures in Algebra 1, she started gathering street data. She went to students who are failing and asked them the questions. Why are you failing? What's happening? What's going on? That has drastically influenced the types of things that we are doing in professional learning for our math. And we found out that math goes to die for us in middle school. Their love of math goes to die. So we have doubled down on what we are doing in connection and belonging and agency in our math classes based on that street data that we have. All of our secondary schools have student advisory teams. That is a requirement in our district. They have monthly meetings. They talk about safety, campus culture, connection, and belonging. Are you engaged in your learning? Like for reals, are you engaged?
And I also just want to point into the street data piece. Our superintendent and Tiffany and our executive director of student leadership and learning have now put street data as a required form of data in the principal's evaluation. So it's not just CASP and iReady and all of that fun data. They now have to bring straight data to the table when they talk about their goals and their evaluation.
Yes, they do. Let's talk a little bit about raising student voice and participation, RSVP. Angela?
Yeah, so this is something that was introduced to our school it's from Castle, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like a state leadership organization. And so with this, we have a modified third period once a month. We change our schedule and our third period is made really long. It's like 80 minutes. And in that, you have 40 minutes of instructional time and 40 minutes of the RSVP time. With RSVP, it's a way to bring, random people into leadership and give them a leadership role that is both high risk and low risk. High risk in terms of they're now presenting in front of a class, low risk in terms of it's their own homeroom class. So in their homeroom class, they're getting recognized by teachers, and this also brings different people to leadership. And they're trained by our ASB team. We have a class that's for RSVP specifically, and they're trained and they come up with a curriculum to ask students, like if you had any chance to change anything on our campus, what would you change? And they come up with something, and then it's once a month. We meet again in classes and we say, okay, the next one is action. What are we going to do about this? The next one is planning, and then it's action. And so there's like 3 summits, and we do this twice a year. We restart it. So it's just a great way to give different people different positions of leadership. So yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we talked a little bit about our superintendent student advisory committee. At the district level, we are as committed to student voice and agency as we are at the site levels. So our student board members, they are our toughest critics. I'll tell you, when I go up to the diet, when I go up and have to present every month, the questions that I am most worried about are from our student board members.
Dr. Campbell, can you please tell me how you're going to effectively implement the system where every student, it's crazy. Our students go after her in a really good collegial
Very
way.
nice way, but they know
they
can,
ask the
and they do.
questions.
How did you get student voice on that, Dr. Campbell? Okay. We do take our student board members to our CSBA conferences. So whatever our board members are doing, our student board members, our adult board members are doing, our student board members are doing. With our policy updates, our board asked us to bring street data. They asked, how have we collected student input? I think it's really interesting that Angela brought up she showed up in her PJs, because from what we heard from our students and students meeting with board members, our dress code totally changed. We actually don't really have a dress code anymore because of what our board heard from students, the gender piece, all of it. We do have student briefings with the board, and it's that idea of qualitative and quantitative data presentations, and lots of district committees where our students are on leading, co-leading with us. Okay, we have run through a whole lot of stuff, so here's a summary real fast. So, authentic student leadership and design built on the belief that our students are our colleagues in the work. Systems, because it doesn't happen by accident. We are moving in the direction. This is Ms. DiRanna's and my big plan for second semester and moving into next year, is the co-construction of our courses with our students. We want to move and need to move beyond the advisory of students just in the room, but really having structures for advocacy and decision-making. Here's what we learn: when we give them the platform, they take it, they run with it, and usually we just have to get out of their way. And our professional learning needs to be and has become driven by student voice. Our ladies have some advice.
Okay, last advice. So, first one, investing in your students. So showing them that you feel that they are the number one student. To every single student, make them feel like they are your number one student. First point. Second, knowing the difference between working for them versus working with them. You guys don't work for us. We're working together. And then also in that same note, it's also because education doesn't happen to us. We're always learning together. Teachers are learning from students, students are learning from teachers. So it's education, but we're learning together. And then lastly, I love to tell every adult I get to meet this, is that education aside, courses aside, curriculum aside, you guys are raising people. You guys are raising people that are going out into the world. So we also heard from Dr. Walker last week. She said, you don't have to change the world. You just have to change one person. And so think about that when you're talking to your students, that who do you want them to be when they leave into the world? And how are you changing the world through that person? So you're raising people.
And then this is just an infographic that I made like last night. So it's just a way to organize data, or not data, sorry, organize my advice visually, since that's how I learn. But it's more of like choosing to listen. So that's where the headphones came from. And then giving the students an opportunity, working with them to form that heart, if that makes sense. So that's just like our biggest things, is just, give students the opportunity. If you listen, they'll tell you what they need. So, Dr. Brown, the same person that invited Keep It at the conference, was the AP that I got in trouble with. But, since she listened to me, I eventually in my senior year became Equity Coalition lead and ASB president. And I presented at this conference and this conference. And there's just so many things that can be developed when you give a student an opportunity.
Like, she just made us a logo last night. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. So your last question is this: what would it look like to partner with your students to co-design educational policies, practices, and services? Like, for reals, for reals. Think about that.
So one trick I learned from another conference a long time ago, because, you come here, you have great things, you're inspired, and then the weekend happens and class happens, right? So one of the things I learned is, if you're willing, take out your calendar, make yourself a calendar invite for Monday or Tuesday morning to say, I need to answer this question. How am I going to move my kids, my system, my site along this continuum? How do you move from expression to leadership? What are the small moves that you can make? Or you can just think about that too.
Our last quote of the day: no better engine to pull a train of school reform than student voice. Once it picks up steam, it is difficult to derail. We know now. Dr. Campbell, what are you doing? A fact that will be unmistakable as this work unfolds. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Here's our contact.